Listen, our guest speaker has been here before when he was one of the top executives at Eastman, so he's no stranger to our club. If I read off his whole bio, that'd be close. I mean, he's really an accomplished person. I got to know Mark a little bit while we worked together on some economic development issues. You folks, you Eastman guys know that he was the chief manufacturing officer and engineering officer for Eastman at the time he retired in July 22. Um, he had a 36-year career with the company. At one time, leading over 10,000 team members. Um, Mark has not let any grass grow on him since he retired from Eastman. He's got a PhD now in business administration to go along with his first degree in engineering at UT, and then an MBA from Northwestern University. Uh, he's been involved in all kinds of things in the community. He's a corporate board member with J.N. Cooper Engineered Materials and Lutron Electronics. He's a trustee of Milligan College. He's been involved in UT's Tickle College of Engineering on their board of advisors. He is just a real accomplished person, and to go along with Ted's prayer about hope, I think he's going to give us a message of hope. Please give a great Kiwanis welcome to my friend Mark Cox.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you very much. It's good to see everyone today, and thank you for coming out, and thank you for your interest. Speaking of 40-some years ago, it was about 41 years ago, I remember going as a student from Sullivan North High School to the Kiwanis luncheon at Holiday Inn. And there, Miss Hamilton, it's good to see you. You probably let me out of class to go do that. Thank you. She's actually maybe 1 year younger than me. All right, it's good to see everyone, and thank you for coming, and my former Eastman colleagues. It's good to see so many of you as well. Hope, prison. What do you think about when you think about prison? Perhaps put that in your mind, and I want to take you through a journey I've had the privilege of going on during my 3 years in graduate school at Pepperdine University as a result of my professor and advisor, Dr. Christina Gibson's notoriety and interest in seeing every human being fulfill their potential. And as a result of that, she was given the opportunity to do research in the area I'm going to talk about, and knew I was interested in the dignity of work. And as you think about the city of Kingsport, its history, John B. Dennis, Pearlie Wilcox, the folks who led the effort to have an integrated industrial city, it allowed many folks to come from farming lives, which are good lives, but to have a house with a carport in Kingsport and perhaps send their kids to college. But as we've seen industrial decline in the United States, my interest was in understanding how that could be reinvigorated, the dignity of work, and provide opportunity for folks. And that was tangential to this opportunity I'm going to tell you about, and that's why I ended up doing my research on this. So, for many returning citizens who've been in prison 20 years, 30 years, hope is a train that's left the station. There's not much hope for these folks in their minds, in others' minds. And we look at this is hard to believe, but roughly 700,000 people are released from U.S. prisons each year. That's hard to believe, isn't it? 700,000 people. And recidivism rates, the high end, and I'm not going to take you through all the scholarly work. It's rigorous, it's detailed, but it's very clear that if you've been in prison 20 to 30 years, the chances of you going back are 50 to 80%. So 80% represents the top end. The literature also highlights what a challenging transition it is to come out of 20 or 30 years in prison and try to enter the workforce with a record of having been in prison. Think about your identity. In prison, you had an identity. In prison, perhaps you were somebody. Now you're re-entering a society where when you went in, there were no cell phones. Now you can hardly cross the street without one. So my dissertation work was on how coaching programs, like we get in corporate America, cognitive coaching programs can enhance the likelihood of re-entry. And returning citizens face a lot of challenges. Denigrating mirrors. What does that mean? That means that when they re-enter, society reflects something back to them that is demoralizing. Such as if your neighbor returned from prison. How do you approach that? If you intersect with someone in the community who was in prison, how do you approach that? And foraging for work really captures what the returning citizen often has to do. How do you put it on an employment application that you were in prison? How do I get my first job? How do I stand vertical and get my second job? How do I get a promotion? It's hard to get work. Affordable housing's tough too. So something very special happened at a prison in the United States, medium to max security prison in Pennsylvania. And I'm going to tell the story of that in the research we did. But before you do research, and my respect for academic research has gone up as a result of this, you have to really understand the literature. And there's plenty out there. And it falls in three major categories: psychological transformation, prison programming, and reintegration. So I reviewed about 250 scholarly articles that were refereed to understand, has what happened at this prison been studied? Has it ever happened before? And there was almost zero evidence of that. And that's important to know for the following reason. When you are looking at an area that has not been researched, you can't do quantitative research. You can't do math. There's nothing to do math on and draw conclusions. So you have to go to the qualitative side of research, the storytelling, etc., to build a foundation on whether there is even anything of interest here. So that's what we ended up doing. As a result, we started looking at the intersection of coaching and psychological transformation and how that might work in the prison context. I had the opportunity to interview 16 men. This was an all-male prison who had been in prison 20 to 30 years, who went through a cognitive coaching and leadership program implemented by a female warden named Miss Susan Morris, 30-year veteran, and she led these men on a phenomenal journey that you're going to hear about. We did cross-sectional interviews. All that means is that I took a cross-section of the men who had gone through this program, been released, and had a standardized question set that I asked, and I recorded their responses. Had to have permission to do that. It's a very rigorous process in terms of getting approval to do that, and we did get it. We worked with a company called Social Purpose Corrections. The leader of this company was the warden at this prison, Brian Keown. Also working with this company is Miss Susan Folk Morris, the female assistant warden and head of education. They formed Social Purpose Corrections after retiring from the Federal Bureau of Prisons because they were so amazed by what happened at this prison that they wanted to take it to other federal prisons. The problem is they had no scholarly research to support what they observed. That's why they reached out to my professor, Christina Gibson, asked her if she would look at it because of her notoriety. And she said, I have a student who has tangential interest, and we got rolling. But here's what's amazing. This is amazing. It happened. What are we going to do about it? The returning citizens who participated in this program and were released, 2% recidivism rate. Can you believe that? These are folks 20 to 30 years in prison. It's very clear. There's no debate on whether the recidivism rate is at least 50%. 2% went back. stark contrast. So, what was the coaching program? Well, it was good. There is a lady named Dr. Ellen Neely Ritter who runs a coaching practice near that prison. She was friends with Miss Morris, and Miss Morris led a general education program, but she also led a small program in that general education program that focused on how you think, and she wanted to do more. So it's a good program, smart goal setting, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely, the things we get in corporate America. It's good. It's good. They implemented it. Ms. Morris identified candidates, and she was pretty dogged about it. She would call them out in the prison yard. Hey, Mr. So-and-so, I think you would benefit. They loved her. They respected her tremendously. Eventually, she got 10 men to agree. 10 men started the program. It was an 8-week program taught by Miss Morris. It set them on fire. These men started believing, I'm going to call them the pioneer cohort, that they could do more, that they could be more. Whether they're ever released or not, they could be more in prison. They could help others. They then started the Hope Coaching Project, which was led by them, administered by them, with assistance from Dr. Ritter and from Miss Morris, and it morphed into a 1.5-year program where everyone who completed that program would be a certified coach. And if they were ever released, they could practice coaching. If they were never released, they could practice it in-house. They had accountability with regard to doing homework, coaching on goal setting, how I respond to others, how to have difficult conversations, how to manage my thinking, how to think rather than react, how to understand others and ask good penetrating questions, how to listen first before expressing my viewpoint. All those things that we're taught. So what happened? Well, if you look at these are pseudonyms, not the actual names. This is a kind of a split of the interviews I did. The 16 returning citizens are shown in green and blue. You can see green I was able to interview 6 of the 10 original pioneers. Then the remaining 10 are next generation as they went on and coached within the prison. The head of the prison and multiple leaders at the prison said it changed the culture, the tenor of the whole prison as this happened. So here's the data, and we're going to look at the model in just a moment. 32 total interviews. I interviewed some of these gentlemen more than once. I interviewed the administrators, the wardens, many pages of single-space transcription I went through, archival documents, lecture plans, etc. And we're going to do a little academic here. For those in the room who are very quantitative, and I know we've got plenty, including me, you wonder, how rigorous is this? Well, there is a rigorous process, and it's called coding. It's the GEOA method. It's what's used to do qualitative research. And basically what you do is you take a transcript, you go through it word by word, all those 267 pages, and you start developing codes that you call taking thoughts captive. That would be a code to describe something an interviewee said. Ended up with about 250 of those. Then you narrow it to a smaller code set, and then you start developing themes. And it wouldn't be complete if I didn't go through an example. First order codes, you can see some of them. Manning the mind's gate, envisioning the pathway, disciplining the mind. Those supported the second order code of shifting mindset. And finally, a theme, hoping. And that hoping theme was one of 6 themes that went into the model. Here they are, the second order codes, the 24, and there are the 6 themes. Surviving, incubating hope From outside the person, incubating hope within the person, hoping, transforming, and thriving. Now you may ask, why did you do that? Why are you going through all that? Well, we've got to understand, did something actually happen? And can we verify it using a legitimate qualitative process for evaluating data, spoken data? And here's the model. So I want to take you through it. It began with surviving. These men were in a zone of self-perpetuating low hope. Before they went into prison, after they got in prison. They didn't whine. They weren't complaining. They didn't complain. Almost all of them were very thankful for having gone to prison. Here's an example. Talking about low agency. People don't have any agency. They don't. They can't even decide what time they get up in the morning, what they're going to eat. You know, it's just so little. Now, when we talk about hope, the basis of our work, and for time's sake, I didn't go into this, is hope theory. It came out in 1990 by Carl Snyder, and it's very simple and very powerful. It's been validated in academics, in leadership, in athletics, and it simply says if two things exist, one, some sense of agency. I can make at least one decision. And two, I can see a path from here to somewhere else that's better. If those two things exist, it's like a machine. They turn together as a cog, and they turn the big wheel of hope. That's what happened here. And it happened through this warden going to them, believing they could do more, and she served as an external incubator of hope. And we see it. Coming off lockdown, we're coming back down at the same dining hall for the first time in 2 weeks, and lockdowns are reality in prison at times. Here she is at the bottom of the hill, waving me down. Mr. Allen, come here. I said, oh my, she's calling out my name. Everybody's looking at me in the prison yard. Why is she doing this? I went over and she said, here's your textbook. I'd like for you to come. And he came. He has been released. All these men have been released that I'm talking about, and is thriving in beautiful ways. Strong leader. But we also saw the impact of internal incubation of hope through the way the men started interacting. And I won't go into all that I'd like to, but we don't have time. But physical touch. Physical touch was not something you typically engaged in, right? This was done in the chapel. They learned how to hold hands. They learned how to pray together. They learned what a meaningful touch would be. They were also held accountable for using these coaching tools, for having people in their cell block they would coach, for setting goals with others and helping coach them toward achieving those goals while they achieved their own. So as hope began to incubate, and I know on time, I'm not going to hit every quote here. Spirituality had a big role for many of them. Many of them deepened their relationship with the Lord. You see one talking about, I was part of the praise and worship team playing drums. The other one, this is interesting. Victor said, everything just starts looking like it's all part of God's plan. That's interesting from someone who may have had a life sentence. I'm not sure what his sentence was. Or a 200-year sentence, perhaps. Their mindsets started to shift. Remember what I said about hope theory? Think about this. Some of the best theories are just common sense, and in hindsight, once they've been validated, that makes total sense. You think about a kid at the Boys and Girls Club, and you say, okay, are you going to, you could take Algebra 1. And they're like, well, I guess I could take Algebra 1. Or I may have a different kind of challenge at home that may prohibit me from even thinking about doing my homework tonight. Or I may not, right? So if you create a situation where you do have a clear pathway, which is what Boys and Girls Club does a lot of, then they can start exercising some agency. That's what they started doing. The 10, remember, the pioneering 10, they could have just stopped. Cool. 8 weeks. Thank you, Miss Morris. We've got our certification, and we do feel better about ourselves and think there's hopeful things. No, they got set on fire. They developed a total program that was offered to every incoming inmate at this huge prison. So, see the shifting mindset? We learned that basically your input, the things you put into your mind, whether it's a book you read, TV shows you watch, taking the pathway, over time, those other life plans come into play. We, as that core group, we're constantly trying to look ahead. Wow, we're starting to see some future orientation occurring among these men. And that's what happened. And this is really the heart of the model and where I'd like to land for just a moment. This zone of nascent self-efficacy formation was occurring with these men, and it's yellow and blue because it waxed and waned. You have to develop these muscles. But their identity began to redevelop. They started expressing self-efficacy, which is also a theory we used a bit, but it says they can face challenges and show enough strength to get through the resistance that may come and achieve a goal. And there's plenty of it in prison. Imagine you're going to a coaching class in prison. Now, I get a little feedback on that from others in the prison. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? What's your real objective? They pressed through that. Their identity began to shift from inmate exclusively to someone doing something with their lives. And see this loop? Agency exercise in purple, pathway taking in blue. It became a virtuous, self-perpetuating loop. They began to exercise agency. They began to have confidence. They began identifying and taking more pathways. And then the transformation began, demonstrating accountability, doing what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it without being asked, helping others do the same, relating well with others. But this vertical line is really important. Pre-return. Pre-return. So admire them. This story is about these 16 men, Miss Morris, Miss Ritter. They are the heroes. This is not that long ago either, by the way. So it's one thing, and it's an amazing thing, to do this in prison. It's an amazing thing. It would have been an amazing thing to do it outside of prison. It's even more amazing to do it in prison. But here comes the real challenge. This, crossing the return threshold, right? That's the real challenge. Now, you've been in prison 25 years, you're released. What are you going to do now? Right? Well, the strength they built, the self-efficacy they built, the hoping capability they built, transferred to the post-release environment. They developed future orientation, and they were able to move forward. Alan says, the coaching program gave me the courage to focus on me becoming the person that I felt I was always intended to be. Living that purpose out even inside prison. Even if it meant I would never be released, it gave me, I'm going to say, the courage to live that way, that defied expectations of how individuals like myself and others just are supposed to live. Prisoners are supposed to live. I love this one. What's the distance between who I am now and who I really want to be, and what work needs to be done? Expansive vocabularies, very, very sharp and intelligent. That's the concept of coaching to the gap. Not everyone wants to know their gaps. Not everyone wants to address them, but they did. And it was transformational. It's a becoming, Kyle said. Really encouraging. So what about now? Well, the end of the model. You see the themes manifested here. You see the 6 themes: coaching, internal hope incubation, external hope incubation, hoping, transforming, thriving. The model came from those interviews, all those transcripts, all that triangulation. They are now thriving. They have families, they have jobs, and experiencing wellness, which is really encouraging. So, the middle quote. When I first came home, the only employment opportunity for me when I moved back was $9 an hour at a job at a halfway house. Coaching allowed me to see the end goal. Starting with that $9 an hour job, progressing. Several of these guys are working for corporations you would know. One of the gentlemen talked about his initial job required him to wear dress, pants, and shirt. And he would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning at the halfway house and walk, because he didn't have a car, to the job. It took an hour to walk there, do the job, walk back. Takes a lot of resilience. Now, what are the implications? Well, coaching programs within the prison context materially improve the likelihood of success. I believe that. Now, why have we not done them? Don't know. Perhaps because this has never been studied or observed before. But it just happened. We gave this work to Social Purpose Corrections when I finished in August. They have now taken it to the U.S. Federal Bureau of Prisons and are in active discussions right now about disseminating a program like this throughout the country. We feel confident that we have strong database to say that statement. Now, the economic burden is also important to think about. Let's just say 70% recidivism rate, and we see 480,000 people who do not recidivate. Let's say rather than 70, it's 68%. 480,000 additional people come into the workforce annually. They're productive, they're contributing, rather than going back, right? 3 primary implications. Learning to coach works in the carceral environment. And hope and transformation can be realized in the carceral setting, but it also extends, once realized there, into the post-release environment. So, I would call a 70% recidivism rate a normalization of deviation. In other words, these folks were deemed ready to re-enter society, right? That's a pretty high failure rate. And all the costs associated with that, for them, their families, for us. Again, no complaints about serving their time. We can do better than that. And these folks have showed us that it's possible. And here are some of the things they're doing now. Entrepreneurs, business owners, really impressive. And they have shattered the norm. And they have shown us that hope is not a train that has left the station. So, as we go back, we'll do a little Q&A. As we go back and think about when I said, what do you think about when you think about prison? Think about that. I could think about that too. When I started 3.5 years ago at Pepperdine, I had no idea that I'd be doing this. No notion. But I now understand a bit more about prison, and these are human beings, and we are human beings, and they have experienced incarceration, and perhaps in all cases, rightly so. But we've all taken a journey of growth and redemption, so we need to think about that a bit. So with that, I invite any questions